Around 1220 AD, an Icelandic scholar named Snorri Sturluson wrote down something that had been passed from mouth to mouth for 300 years. He called it the Prose Edda. In it, he described a creature so large that it encircled the entire ocean floor and bit its own tail. A serpent that lived in the deep cold water surrounding all known land. A creature whose movement caused the currents of the North Atlantic, whose sleep kept the sea calm, whose waking would end the world. He called it Jormungandr, the World Serpent. Historians filed it under mythology, under superstition, under the category of things pre-scientific cultures invented to explain what they couldn't understand. That categorization is wrong, because in 2016, a team of marine biologists published a study in the journal Science that identified a living animal found specifically in Norse waters, specifically described as moving in a circle beneath the ice, specifically known to Norse fishermen for 1,000 years, whose biology matches Jormungandr in ways that are too precise to be coincidence. The Vikings were not imagining something, they were describing something real. Before you can understand what they found, you have to understand what Snorri actually wrote, because most people who know the name Jormungandr have never read the original description. The creature in the Prose Edda is not described the way modern retellings suggest. It is not a dramatic, fire-breathing sea dragon. It is not aggressive. It does not attack ships or devour sailors. Snorri describes Jormungandr as living in the deepest part of the ocean. Specifically, and this detail is in the text, it lives beneath the ocean floor surrounding Midgard, which in Norse cosmology meant the habitable world. It encircles the boundary. It holds the position. It is patient. The one time it encounters Thor directly, it does not attack. It surfaces when disturbed, and when Thor pulls it toward him with a fishing line baited with an ox head, the serpent simply lets itself be brought to the surface, not struggling, not fleeing, and is described as staring at Thor with what the text calls poisonous eyes. The serpent's eyes are mentioned specifically. The gaze is described as fixed, unchanging, unsettling, not wild or predatory, but locked and still in a way that disturbs the person looking into them. That description was not invented, it was observed. And the other detail that appears consistently in Norse sources about sea creatures, including the Konungs Skuggsja, a Norwegian educational text from around 1250 AD, is the movement. The creature doesn't swim in a straight line. It circles. Norse fishermen who worked the waters around Greenland, Iceland, and the Norwegian Sea described encountering something enormous moving in slow circles beneath the surface of the water, not attacking, not fast, just turning endlessly in the cold. They did not know what it was. They knew it was massive, ancient, and alive. They were right about all three. In 2016, Julius Nielsen, a marine biologist at the University of Copenhagen, published something that rewrote the biology of the North Atlantic. Nielsen and his team caught and tagged 28 Greenland sharks across the North Atlantic over several years. They used a technique called radiocarbon dating, applied to the lens nuclei of the shark's eyes tissue that forms before birth and is never replaced to determine the age of each animal. The oldest shark in the sample was a female. She was between 272 and 512 years old. The midpoint estimate placed her birth at approximately 1504 AD, 12 years after Columbus reached the Americas. She had been alive during the Reformation, during Shakespeare, during the entire colonization of the New World. She was not the oldest Greenland shark ever estimated. She was simply the oldest in that particular sample. The Greenland shark Somniosus microcephalus is now understood to be the longest-lived vertebrate animal on Earth. Some individuals are believed to reach 500 years of age, possibly more. The data is difficult to push further because the technique requires that the animal dies in order to be tested. The sharks in Norse waters in the 10th century, when Eric the Red first reached Greenland, were likely already old when the settlement was built. Some of them may still be alive now. That is not a rhetorical flourish. That is the biology. A Greenland shark alive during the fall of the Norse Greenland colony in the 1400s is, statistically, likely still swimming somewhere in the North Atlantic today. Here is where the biology and the mythology converge in a way that is very difficult to explain as coincidence. The Greenland shark is found almost exclusively in the same geographic range that the Norse knew as the world's edge: Norway, Iceland, Greenland, the Davis Strait, the Labrador Sea, the deep, cold waters of the North Atlantic. It grows to between 4 and 7 meters in length. Large individuals approach the size that Norse fishermen would have recognized as extraordinary, larger than their boats, visible as a shape beneath clear Arctic water before it's submerged again. It moves at an average speed of 1.6 kilometers per hour. This is not a speed. It is a drift. A Greenland shark in motion is almost indistinguishable from a very large piece of the ocean itself, except that it turns, slowly, in wide arcs. It circles, not randomly. The Greenland shark's movement pattern in cold, deep water, where its metabolism drops to near zero in order to survive, is a slow, continuous spiral through its territory. Scientists who have tracked them with acoustic tags describe the pattern as a prolonged spiral around a fixed point. Snorri Sturluson described Jormungandr circling the ocean floor. Now look at the eyes. The Greenland shark hosts a parasite called Omatocoida elongata. In most Greenland sharks, this parasite attaches to the cornea of both eyes. It is white, roughly 5 centimeters long, and trails from the eye like a pale ribbon. In photographs, a Greenland shark's face looks as if both eyes are damaged, clouded, whitened, fixed. The shark cannot see in any meaningful way. It hunts by smell. Its eyes stare not in any direction, not responding to movement or light, simply forward, fixed. Snorri described Jormungandr's eyes as still and poisonous looking, as fixed. A Norse fisherman pulling a Greenland shark to the surface in the 1200s, looking into those parasite-clouded eyes, was not imagining something supernatural. He was looking at something real and describing it accurately in the only language he had. And the flesh. Greenland shark meat is toxic. It contains trimethylamine oxide and urea in concentrations that cause neurological symptoms in humans: vomiting, disorientation, a state described in Old Norse and Icelandic texts as similar to extreme intoxication. In modern Iceland, the flesh is still processed into a dish called hakarl, fermented for months to reduce the toxins to safe levels. Unprocessed, it is dangerous. The Norse knew not to eat it fresh. A massive, ancient, circling creature with fixed white eyes and flesh that poisoned anyone who consumed it, living in the cold, deep water at the edge of the known world, is not a difficult leap from Jormungandr. It is almost a description. There is a detail in the Thor and Jormungandr fishing story that most retellings skip. When Thor pulls the serpent to the surface and it stares at him, the text says Thor raises Mjolnir to strike, and then the ox head bait breaks free. The serpent sinks. The story is usually read as a draw. Thor didn't kill it. Jormungandr didn't kill Thor. But there is a smaller detail embedded in that scene. Thor baits the hook with the head of an ox. Not a seal, not a fish. An ox, a land animal, the largest available bait. In the 1200s, Greenland shark bait in Norse Iceland was routinely described as animal offal and large pieces of meat lowered on weighted lines into deep water. They were caught not by hook, but by the smell of decaying flesh, brought to the surface level and then pulled up from below. The method in the myth matches the method in practice. Snorri was not describing an imaginary animal. He was recording something that Norse fishermen in the North Atlantic did, and then attaching a theological frame to the encounter. Biologist Baldur Thorhallsson at the University of Iceland has argued this directly. The Greenland shark, he wrote in a 2008 paper, is the most likely biological foundation of the Jormungandr myth, not as a source of exaggeration, but as a source of accurate observation that was then elevated to cosmological significance. The Norse were not pre-scientific in the sense of being incurious. They were systematically curious about the natural world in a way that modern readers underestimate. The sagas record specific wind patterns, specific whale behavior, specific tide cycles. They named fish species correctly. They described the life cycles of seabirds with accuracy that held up to later biological observation. They watched the Greenland shark for 1,000 years. They described what they saw. They called it a serpent because it moved like one, a slow, enormous, undulating shape beneath the surface of the water, and because nothing in their existing categories of the world was large enough, old enough, or strange enough to contain what they were actually looking at. The Prose Edda says that Jormungandr will release its tail at Ragnarok, the end of the world, and rise to the surface. It says the oceans will flood the land when the serpent moves. A Greenland shark that has circled the same cold water for 4 centuries, moving at the pace of a slow current, older than every dynasty that ever rose and fell in Europe, is not mythology. It is simply something that has been there longer than we have been watching. Snorri Sturluson was 40 years old when he finished the Prose Edda. He lived in Iceland, less than a day's sailing from waters where Greenland sharks still circle in the deep cold today. He did not invent Jormungandr. He inherited a description that had been passed through generations of people who fished those waters, saw that shape beneath the surface, pulled it to the light, and looked into its clouded white eyes, and understood that they were looking at something the world had no proper name for. They gave it the biggest name they had. Julius Nielsen's 2016 study did not debunk a myth. It found the animal underneath one. The World Serpent of Norse mythology is real, slow, ancient, and still circling the same ocean it was circling when the first Norse ship entered the North Atlantic. The difference between what Snorri wrote and what a marine biologist writes is not the observation. They saw the same thing. The difference is the frame, each one placed around what they could not fully explain. The Greenland shark does not know it was once called the end of the world. It was already old when the name was given. It will be older still when the name is finally forgotten. There is another story about a wolf that Norse mythology described as bound by a ribbon thinner than silk about the chain that held it. About the animal underneath the legend and what wolves actually do when they are afraid. That one is next.